The Garden Report is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a practice edition of the Garden Report, the final practice before Celtics Cavs Game 1 on Tuesday. Pretty subdued tone at practice today, not a ton in terms of elevating the series or the Mitchell-Brown matchup or whatever storylines there might usually be going into a series. They're just, after this week and a half off, Josue, ready to play Game 1, ready to take care of business and advance through this series. And there's really not a lot of fanfare going into this one, I can feel.
Yeah, I mean, I just think everyone's just ready to see what it looks like between the Cavs and the Celtics. I feel like a lot of people sort of had the Orlando Magic kind of lined to meet up against the Celtics, just the way the series ended. But then what a comeback from the Cleveland Cavaliers, show a lot of heart in that second half of that Game 7 to swing things their way, which is sort of what I was thinking about, the kind of game they would have just because of what they show in terms of when the pressure is on. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, of course, what he did in Game 6, everyone really pointed to that as like, man, you do that in a losing effort, it's too bad. But this is the type of team, and of course Donovan Mitchell is the leader of that they don't give up. You know, they don't get down on themselves often, even though they are shorthanded. I do think you're going to get a lot of that effort and that type of heart that you're going to see from Donovan Mitchell, but it's got to be throughout the entire Cavs team. And I feel like just like the people who are waiting at home, the Celtics sort of just want to see what that looks like and get it going. You know, obviously going into the series without Kristaps Porzingis, but also having that time off to really gear up and get ready for it.
Some big takeaways from today. Obviously, it's a defensive team in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I try to draw some parallels between them and Miami. I think the big one that Derek White mentioned is that they don't switch as much on that Cleveland side, and you obviously have a ton of length, size inside if they're going to have Jarrett Allen ready to go. And that's one of the other big themes, I think, going into this series is just how healthy either team will be. Obviously, Porzingis expected to miss at least the first half of the series, I would say. We'll see what happens if it goes longer. But Jarrett Allen missed the last 3 games of that Cavs series for them. He's a huge part of their offense and their defense, frankly. And Dean Wade, who has played the Celtics well in the past. Everyone remembers the last game these two teams played where he hit 5 threes in the fourth quarter. He missed the entire first-round series. The injury report will come out later this afternoon, probably by the time you see this. But those guys are banged up. And one of the big things, Justin Rowan and I talked about last night is if they don't have their depth here, if they don't have those major parts of their starting lineup, they're not going to be able to compete in this series, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really strong talking point throughout the series. You know, how these guys manufacture points being shorthanded and not having those guys in the mix for sure, especially in the front court. You know, defensively, we all have been talking, I mean, they've been talking about it too. Derek White, Jaylen Brown, people that we've spoken to, their size, their athleticism, what the problem they provide up front. But yeah, I'm with you, Bobby. It'll be interesting to see how they respond offensively. You know, guys coming off the bench. You know, it's a pretty thin bench in Cleveland. The Boston Celtics have shown a lot of that they can rely on in terms of a couple of guys, or at least a few guys, I should say, coming off that bench. So not having Kristaps in the mix, you feel confident the Celtics going to be able to respond, but I wonder how Cleveland responds, especially on the offensive end, coming into the series so shorthanded against a giant like the Boston Celtics. It'll be interesting.
There's a lot more talk to come. We're going to have a live preview show tonight on the Garden Report, 8 o'clock, so you can join us in the chat there, and we'll get deeper into the matchups, the series, all the different things that are going to factor into this. But what are you expecting out of this series, just on a higher level, Josue? How long could it go? How competitive do you see it being? What is just your overall expectation heading in?
I think, honestly, the end result could be similar to what we saw in the first round, but it's not going to look like the same type of matchup we saw against the Miami Heat. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be tougher defensively, if you ask me. I think they do provide issues in terms of transition, scoring and transition. I think Donovan Mitchell is a big part of that. We talked about throughout the course of the regular season how when those top scoring guards like Donovan Mitchell get going, and especially if they get support from the three-point shot and, again, scoring in transition, those are the ways that you can really get ahead of the Celtics throughout the course of a series. But, if this thing wraps up in 5, I wouldn't be surprised if Celtics win in 5, maybe 6. I really don't think this would be a really long series. However, the Cleveland Cavaliers and their health can really dictate which way that goes. I don't think, if I'm being completely honest, I'd be really surprised if we see Kristaps at all in this series. However, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, they could have guys pop into the matchup that we're not seeing going into Game 1. So how the series evolves will be interesting in the sense of on the health front from Cleveland, but just on what we're seeing right now, I'm predicting about a 5, maybe a 6-game series. Celtics winning it 4-1 or 4-2.
I'm in a similar place. If the health's where it stands now, probably 5. I
Yeah.
could see it being 6 if Allen and Wade return, though. And they'll all be competitive games. I think that would be a big difference versus last round, too. There were a lot of blowouts, a lot of uncompetitive games in that first round series. The Heat were much more banged up than even the Cavs are right now. So they played tight games during the year. Those first 2 games in Boston both decided by less than 10 points. The Cavs, of course, won the last game that these teams played, and they've played some great games. People forget, Cavs won 3 out of 4 the last year in the last year's series between these two teams. 3 overtime games, 3 incredibly competitive ones. But Mitchell banged up, Wade out right now, Allen out as well. It's going to be tough for them without those guys. We'll see where their status is going into Game 1. It's 7 o'clock tomorrow. We'll have a preview show again tonight at 8. Join us for that. And we'll have coverage throughout the series, including in Cleveland next weekend for Games 3 and 4. As the second round finally gets underway. This has been a practice edition of the Garden Report. He's Josue Pavon. I'm Bobby Manning. We'll have plenty more of Celtics Cavaliers over the next week here. Hey, Bobby Manning here. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed this video, so subscribe, turn on notifications, and check out our social media platforms at Celtics CLNS.